Good day, grade 12s. Today is Felix Randal. Right, so what do you need to know in the poem? First of all, you need to understand what a farrier is and what he does. Understand who the speaker in the poem is and his relationship to Felix. And then it's very important that you understand the contrast that the speaker makes between Felix when he was before he was sick and then after he got sick. So it's a physical contrast that he makes, it's a mental contrast that he makes. Make sure that you can explain that, please. Right, so Felix Randal, farrier. Oh, is he dead then? My duty all ended. A farrier is a person who makes horseshoes. It's an extremely physical job. I'm sure that if you've watched any kind of these medieval type movies, you will have seen that there's someone who stands by a fire and then they stick the metal into the fire and the metal gets all red hot and then they beat it with what looks like a massive hammer. So this is very similar to what Felix would have done to make these horseshoes. So it's a very physical job, which means that he would have needed to be quite strong and powerful. So the first line of the poem acknowledges the news that Felix has died. The speaker is a Catholic priest who had been looking after Felix while he was sick, and so his duty that he talks about was to make Felix come to peace with the fact that he would soon die, to help him deal with that and to help him, to accept it. So the tone of the first line is matter of fact. He's unsurprised by the news, he was expecting it. Who have watched his mold of man, big-boned and hardy handsome. So Felix is described as a mold of man. The metaphor in this line compares his physical appearance to a mold. So a mold is used to make copies of something. So it's the original perfect version of something that is used to make further copies of it. So if he was a mold, that tells you that he was quite a well-built man. He was big-boned and hardy handsome, so he was muscular, well-built, strong, ruggedly handsome. Then pining, till time when reason rambled in it, and some fatal four disorders, flesh there all contended. So the repetition of pining is important, it's been asked often. It means a mental or physical decline, so that's what the word actually means. The repetition emphasizes two things. First of all, it's the extent of his decline, so how extreme it was. He went from very big and strong to extremely weak. And then the second part is the time it took for his body to deteriorate. So it didn't happen overnight, but gradually. So he got weaker and weaker and weaker as time went on. Reason rambled is a contrast. Reason shows order and predictability. To ramble means to talk incoherently. This emphasizes the extent of his decline from reasonable to rambling, but also the senselessness of his sickness. And then the fatal four disorders refers to the complications he picked up due to TB, which ultimately caused his death. Sickness broke him. Impatient he cursed at first, but mended, being anointed and all, though a heavenlier heart began some months earlier, since I had our reprieve and ransom tendered to him. Ah well, God rest him all road ever he offended. Please take note of the short sentence to start the stanza. Sickness broke him. It emphasizes the finality of his disease. It was completely destructive. It completely ruined him. When he first discovered he was sick, he was impatient and cursed. He was angry and unaccepting of his fate. But through working with the priest, who is the speaker, he began to accept that he would die soon. Sweet reprieve and ransom is the Holy Communion taken at church. When he first took this, he began to be calmer and his heavenlier heart began to show. When he was anointed or baptized, he became calmer and made peace with his approaching death. So the main point is that he was unaccepting of his illness at first. He was very angry about it. He was not at peace with it, but through working with the speaker, working with this priest, he began to accept it. He began to come to terms with the fact that he's going to die. This seeing the sick endears them to us too it endears. My tongue had taught thee comfort, touch had quenched thy tears Thy tears that touched my heart, child, Felix, poor Felix Randal. Make sure you understand these lines. The speaker says that when we work with someone who's sick, obviously we help them and make an impact on their lives, but us too it endears. This means we are also affected by the person we work with. It's a two-way relationship. So the speaker says he comforted Felix and dried his tears, and he became friends with Felix. Thy tears that touched my heart. So it was not just a one-way relationship. It was not just him helping Felix because that was his job. He actually grew fond of him. He actually enjoyed his company. They became friends. He refers to Felix as child and poor Felix, which suggests weakness and vulnerability. This contrasts with the strong image of Felix created in the previous stanza. How far from then forethought of all thy more boisterous years, when thou at the random grim forge, powerful amidst peers, didst fettle for the great grey dray horse his bright and battering sandal. So the first line of this stanza also emphasizes the change in Felix, as it says he was very different to how the speaker remembers him. How far from then forethought of. So when I think of you back then, basically, it's very far away from what he is now. He then again gives an image of Felix before he was sick. The Grim Forge is a reference to his job as a farrier. It is where he made the horseshoes. So that image that I talked about in the movies that you've seen, that big stone that they bash the metal on, that would be the Grim Forge. He describes Felix as powerful amidst peers, so he was stronger and more muscular than others his age. The great grey dray horse, please don't misunderstand this. He's simply talking about the type of horse that Felix would make shoes for. It's a large breed of horse that was usually used to pull carts. They were extremely muscular and extremely strong, and this is why he's mentioned it in the same stanza as Felix, who was muscular and strong. The bright and battering sandal is the shoe that Felix made for the horses. So the image in these lines is of Felix at work, and it explains that he is very different than he used to be when he was muscular and powerful and in his prime, as sickness made him very weak. So once he got sick, he lost all of those muscles, he became a very weak man. He was very different to how the speaker remembers him when he was in his prime. Okay, and that is Felix Randal, so please do the questions on the poem in the study guide. It is 2.4.1 on page 17. Thank you.